Hello, dear viewers. Welcome to the 6th episode of the series, The Ledger. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single episode of this series in which the victims are cursed and turned into animals. You can also support us by liking the video and leaving your lovely comments. Enjoy the show.
There is no weapon on this earth quieter than a whisper. A blade must be drawn. A gun must be aimed. But a whisper needs only a willing ear in a crowded room, and it kills without ever raising its voice. I have cataloged murderers of every kind between my covers, and I will tell you this: none of them slept as soundly as the whisperers. Tonight my candle is lit. My pages are open, and my ink has begun to stir because somewhere below me, in a ballroom full of champagne and borrowed smiles, the softest killer in the city is working her craft. This is entry number 6. Her name was Selene Vass, and she was, by unanimous and terrified agreement, the most dangerous woman in high society. 32 years old, black-haired, elegant as a drawn dagger, she held no title, no office, no fortune of her own making, only information, and the exquisite instinct for where to pour it. Marriages, careers, reputations, she had ended them all without once raising her voice. A secret, she liked to say, swirling her champagne, is simply money that hasn't been spent yet. The ballrooms adored her. The ballrooms had no idea what she cost them. I watched her spend one that night. A young woman in a pale blue dress, new money, nervous smile, guilty of nothing but outshining the wrong person. Selene leaned close to a single ear and made a small deposit. That is all it takes, you understand. Not a shout, not an accusation. One sentence planted in the right soil. By the time the orchestra finished its waltz, the girl stood alone in a room of turned backs, and no one could even say precisely why. Selene watched from the shadows the way an artist studies a finished canvas. She was very proud of her work. She came home to her penthouse above the glittering city and kicked off the evening like a costume another rival dismantled. Another perfect crime that would never be called one. High above the streets, behind glass and marble, Selene Vass believed what all my entries believe on their final night, that words are weightless, that nothing whispered can ever come back. But I keep the accounts, dear reader. I keep them very carefully, and her page had been ready for a long, long time. She found me on her desk. I do enjoy that moment, the locked door, the empty apartment, and yet there I sit, old leather and patient gold, waiting like an unpaid bill. She circled me twice. She checked the windows. She even laughed once, the short, brittle laugh of a woman who has just realized she is alone with something that should not exist. Then, because creatures like Selene cannot resist a closed book any more than a closed door, she opened me. My pages turned themselves past the peacock and the boar, past the hyena and the chameleon and the bull, past every name I have ever collected, and stopped on clean parchment, and there, in ink of burning gold, I wrote her name in my finest hand, Selene. Beside it, as is my custom, I drew her true face, a small, coiled serpent. She stared at the letters as they dried into the page. "That's a lovely trick," she whispered. It was not a trick, it was an appointment. The golden light rose from my pages and touched her face, and I watched her expression attempt 3 different lies at once: amusement, dismissal, boredom before settling. At last, on the truth. Fear looks strange on a woman who has never worn it. It fit her badly like someone else's coat, but it fit somewhere beneath that flawless composure. Some old animal instinct had already understood what the rest of her refused to. The account was due. It began, as my collections always begin, with something small enough to deny. A tingling on her tongue, that soft, practiced, poisonous tongue. She leaned into the bathroom mirror and examined it under the cold light, and found the tip just slightly dark, as if she had been sipping ink instead of champagne. She told herself it was the wine. They always have a first explanation. It is never the right one. Then came the scales. A small patch below her left ear, where a diamond earring usually did the shining emerald, now glossy and perfect. Each scale fitted to the next like the work of a master jeweler. And here is the detail I confess I savor. They were beautiful. I do not punish with ugliness, that would be crude. I simply bring the inside to the surface and let my entries discover what they have been wearing underneath all along. Her hand flew to her neck and found the scales warm, living hers. She pressed down hard, as though shame could be forced back beneath the skin, and felt more of them rising to meet her fingers, patient as a tide. Selene Vass, who had stood in 100 ballrooms with a cutting reply for every occasion, stood in her own bathroom with nothing to say at all. I noted it in the margin first recorded silence. The mirror was not finished with her. Her eyes, those celebrated emerald eyes that had disarmed diplomats and dismantled marriages, began to change in front of her. The pupils stretched tall and thin, narrowing into vertical slits, and molten gold bled slowly through the green. She gripped the sink and stared at a predator's gaze set in a socialite's face. For years she had hidden it so well, I merely corrected the paperwork. And now I will tell you the moment that decided everything, because there is always such a moment, and it is always a choice. Scaled, slit-eyed, half-marked already, Selene reached for her telephone, not for help. Creatures like her do not call for help. She called to spend one more secret, one last little kill, to feel like herself again. Look at her there in the dark, smiling through her ruin. I have written many entries. Very few of them smile while I work. But every word has a price now, and her account pays in scales. Each syllable of that final rumor sent emerald. Climbing higher up her cheek, she could feel it, mid-sentence, spreading with the rhythm of her own voice, and still she kept talking. That is the part historians of my pages never quite believe. She felt the cost. She paid it anyway. I did not transform Selene Vass that night. I simply stopped interrupting her. Mid-word, her tongue split. The sentence died with a soft, wet hiss, and the telephone slipped from fingers that were no longer quite fingers. Call ended, said the little screen glowing up from the floor, the last message she would ever send. She stood in the ringing silence of her penthouse and heard her own breathing come back to her changed. Serpents, you see, cannot whisper. It was the one mercy I had left to give her audience. She raised her hands to the moonlight and watched the emerald flow over them like rising water across her knuckles. Up her forearms, gloves of scale and gold she would never take off. Her nails darkened, curved, sharpened into black talons. These were the hands that had typed the midnight messages, dialed the ruinous calls, raised 1,000 innocent toasts to freshly ruined names. I keep meticulous records of hands. Hers had earned every scale. She gripped her own arm the way one grips a stranger and found it strange indeed. Armored now in emerald diamonds that glittered with every tremor. There was no laughing this away, no version of it she could whisper into a better shape. Her body had become the one conversation she could not steer. I turned my page. The entry was more than half written. The tall mirror in her bedroom gave her the full accounting. Half her face jeweled emerald, one eye still green and human, one burning serpent gold, neck, arms, hands finished. Below the silk, legs still hers. She stood precisely on the border of herself, at the midpoint I always pause to admire, and ask the glass a question I have heard from every single one of my entries, in every century, in every tongue. What am I? Patience, my dear. My ink was already answering. The answer arrived in her knees. They buckled, and she went down to the cold floor, clutching her legs as if she could hold them to their old shape by force and feeling. Beneath the silk, how badly they wished to be something else. In that moment, I am told, most people call out a name, a mother, a friend, a god. Selene knelt in the moonlight of her beautiful empty penthouse and understood that she had spent 32 years making certain there was no one left to call. Then flesh flowed into flesh, and her legs were simply gone, one long, powerful coil taking their place beneath the gown, scales whispering against silk as it moved. Her black hair spilled loose from its immaculate bun, the last of the architecture coming down. Everything she had built of herself, the posture, the silhouette, the entrance that silenced ballrooms, all of it dissolved into something older and far more honest. My favorite line of any entry is this one, the moment the costume comes off. Behold her now. As I recorded her, a serpent's body thick as a ship's rope, meters of emerald and gold heaped upon the hardwood, and rising from those coils a woman's shape still wearing her party dress, golden-eyed, loose-haired, quite calm. Yes, calm. That is what surrender looks like when fear finally runs dry. She had stopped negotiating. Even the finest tongue in the city knows, in the end, when a debt will be paid in full. Her humanity made its last stand in her face. One green eye, one soft, pale cheek, dark red lips parted around a word that no longer existed for her. And down that final human cheek, a single tear. My critics, and after so many centuries I have collected a few, claim I feel nothing for my entries. Untrue. I recorded that tear with my steadiest hand. I simply did not stop the scales from closing over it, gentle as a page being turned. And then silence, the good kind, the kind her victims never got. Moonlight pooled on the floor. An emerald evening gown lay empty, still holding the ghost of the woman who had worn it, and gliding away from that shed skin moved a serpent of green and gold, unhurried, immense, complete. Nothing of Selene Vass remained. Although look closely, just behind the jaw, two small golden earrings glinting in the dark. Even now, she would want you to know it was her. She sought out the mirror one last time, as they so often do. The great serpent rose before the gold frame, and regarded her reflection with unblinking, molten eyes, the same look I noted with some satisfaction that she once poured across crowded ballrooms. Did she mourn, do you think? Or did she recognize, at long last, the face that had been conducting all those whispers from underneath? I record outcomes, not hearts. But she looked for a very long time. My work there was finished. Entry number 6, written, witnessed, collected. I closed my own covers and let myself come apart into golden dust, drifting out through the penthouse glass and over the sleeping city past 1,000 lit windows, each one holding a name I may yet come to write. The serpent watched me go from the shadows of her beautiful cage. I do not say goodbye to my entries. We part as author and finished page, and both of us endure. But do not close the book just yet. Dear reader, my ink rarely rests for long. Somewhere in this city lives a young woman with copper-red hair and a talent for taking what was never offered to her. She does not know it, but my next page already carries her portrait. Amber eyes, fox ears rising through those auburn waves, a tail like a stolen flame. Entry number 8 is coming. Subscribe and be here when I open. For her sake, stay close. After all, I would so hate for the next name I write to belong to someone who wasn't watching.